Woman hears an odd sound under her floorboards before uncovering a chilling sight below. Thankfully, there are people in the world who have a talent and fearlessness for dealing with the kinds of icky, unsettling jobs most of us would run the other way from. They deal with hazardous waste products, work around dangerous machinery, and crawl in narrow spaces you could get claustrophobic just looking at. Fortunately for the residents of Louisiana, a man named Jeff Horchoff is exactly that kind of fearless person. While helping a woman one afternoon, he used his specialized talents to understand why there was a strange sound coming from under her bed. When photos of the aftermath surfaced online, people were stunned by his jaw-dropping discovery. Residents of southeast Louisiana are no strangers to an abundance of pesky critters. The state is situated on plenty of swampland, and that occasionally attracts unwanted visitors. And when folks have a critter problem, one man they call is Jeff Horchoff. One afternoon, a woman called him about a strange noise emanating from the floorboards underneath her bed. This was actually the second time this particular woman needed help. The wooden panel of flooring where the noise was occurring already had 2 latches installed from Jeff's previous visit, so it wouldn't be difficult getting underneath. Jeff just had no idea what he was in store for. Using a drill he always carried on him to jobs, Jeff unscrewed the bolts holding down the floor panel. Now he could find out what was causing such a disturbance. But first, once he secured the room and put on some protective gloves, he grabbed hold of the latches and lifted. Man, was it heavy. And when he looked underneath, he could see why. Underneath the floorboard was an enormous beehive. Worse, the wooden nook beneath the floorboard was eroded in every which way. Insulation was hanging tattered from the sideboards, and errant pieces of the nest were wedged into splintered cracks. With the hive moved onto a sturdy table, Jeff could get an accurate assessment of the magnitude of the problem. He estimated the hive contained around 10,000 honeybees. How could one man deal with so many buzzing, stinging insects? Well, luckily, Jeff had been pretty much trained his whole life for this moment. Jeff's bee interest began decades ago, after learning how often the relocation of hives occurred. Jeff knew nothing of bees at the time, but he wanted to help ensure the safety of the hardworking animals. He eventually became a master of his craft, learning to harvest honey and make use of everything bees offered. This came in handy. Back at the client's house, Jeff used a special vacuum to make his way around every inch of the hive and pulled the bees through the vacuum tube into a box full of bee frames. There, they'd patiently wait for the queen to arrive. Someone without the proper training would find it nearly impossible to locate a queen bee, but Jeff knew following the commotion of the worker bees would certainly lead to her. It took a little bit of searching, but Jeff eventually located the queen. He needed to keep her separate to prevent the bee box from falling into pandemonium before he was ready to bring them to safety. The reason the queen creates so much chaos is she's the only bee who can lay eggs, and sometimes up to 2,000 a day. She's the most important aspect of a hive, and keeping her safe is vital for a quick and efficient hive rescue. After all 10,000 honeybees were safely vacuumed into the glass panes inside Jeff's bee box, he cut the hive into pieces and fastened it to the panels. He never discarded anything he came across. It was the bees' home after all. Jeff was incredibly lucky that right down the road from his home was the St. Joseph Abbey and Seminary, where he stored rescued hives. There, monks tended to them. Yeah, you heard that right, monks. Wildly, the tradition of beekeeping among monks actually has a history that stretches back hundreds of years. This long-standing tradition always gives peace of mind to Jeff, who knows the bees are in the best hands possible. The last thing Jeff did before he left the bee box in the care of the monks was return the queen. He slid out one of the center panels, allowed the queen to burrow herself under the frantic workers, and replace the pane. Lucky for us, this incredible bee handler doesn't keep his wealth of knowledge to himself. Jeff loves teaching young kids about the significance of honeybees and why it's so important we ensure they thrive. He makes it fun too. Kids love honey.